In this video, I would like to talk about closing or closing techniques. Well, if you do your job well, there is not really a need to close. And why is that? Because if there is trust, then the closing is easy. When there is no trust, then closing is hard. Okay, so it's very simple. Obviously, top salespeople really need to have to close in the sense of the word, so to speak. Because closing is a logical consequence of doing a great job by developing a good relationship, by building trust, by having mutual likability, and that the client can see the need for the product. So remember, whenever you have problems with closing, it's usually not necessarily your technique, it's how you come across. It's maybe your outfit, maybe the way you talk, maybe your professionalism, okay? So in the end, closing is a logical consequence if you do your job well. So when it comes to closing, remember, decisions are always done on an emotional level. It's not done because of facts. Because if it were done on facts and reason and details, we would all drive the same car, which is, maybe a very efficient car that is only focused on the environment and so forth. But people like to drive a great car or this and that because they identify themselves with something else. So remember, everything is done on an emotional level. And when it comes to selling, you need to focus on the right side of the brain. So remember, here, let's say we have a brain, okay, another, and we have the left side and we have the right side. Now, the left side is responsible for numbers, data, figures, okay? So it's the rational side of things, okay? If someone has a high IQ, it's because his left side is well developed. But the right side is emotions, pictures, feelings, things like that, okay? So someone who's very creative is very strong on this side. So in order to obviously convince someone, you need both, but you need to focus on the emotional side of things where you use pictures and emotions. So you need to convince him, so to speak, on an emotional level with stories, or use fear or happy emotions or whatever it is, so you can make a sale. So remember, every decision is a right side decision and not because of facts and figures. Maybe you've seen the movie Glenn Ross. And they have the formula, it's called ABC, which means always be closing. Huh? That's the ABC formula. Now, why is this important? Well, you should start maybe with an initial meeting, and then you have a second meeting, but no more than that. If you have a third and a fourth and a fifth meeting, you know what's going to happen? You're not going to close, or chances that you're going to close are going to go down tremendously. Some people say, if I don't have the first meeting and I close in the first meeting, I'm not even going to bother with the second meeting. Because statistically, this is how it looks. And there's a book. It's one of the Frank Bettger from one of the most successful salespeople in America. He wrote the book, How I Raised Myself from Failure to Success in Selling. And he said in the first meeting, if he had a closing rate of 65%, but the second meeting, the closing rate would drop to 20%, and the third, fourth, and so forth meeting, the closing rate would drop down to 7%. So he said, why even bother with the second and the third kind of meetings? I only do first meetings because my rate or my success rate is higher, okay? So that's important. So whenever you are with a client and the client says, oh, I need to think about it, and I need to, don't give him time to think about it. There is really no I have to think about it. Then you can say, Mr. Client, I'm right here. Let me help you. What exactly do you need to think about? What are the things that you're still unsure about? And then you need to try to find out what the real reason is, and you need to continue to ask questions. And if he's still like hesitant and so forth, sometimes you can say, Mr. Client, can we be honest here for a moment, please? Yes, of course. Tell me, what is the real reason why you're so hesitant? And then maybe he will open up, okay? So sometimes you just need to keep asking and asking and asking till you actually have the answer, and don't give up, don't leave, don't accept, oh, I have to think about it. Never accept and, oh, I have to think about it. Just, keep asking questions. And if he says, I have to think about it, you could also say, well, Mr. Client, I can understand that. If I were in your shoes, I would also have to think about it. Let me tell you, how long or how much do you need to think about it? Well, I need 2 weeks. Okay. So for the next 14 days, are you going to think about it for an hour every day? So which is 14 hours. And he says, no, of course not. That would be ridiculous. I said, exactly. You see? So why don't we do this? If you really, really have to think about it, then why don't you think about it tonight? And I'll give you a call in the morning. And then I expect that we have a positive answer. Can we agree on that? Sure. Okay. So that's another technique that you can use. Never, just because sometimes I have to think about it means I'm scared, I'm unsure, or there's something that I haven't mentioned that is an issue for me, and it was your failure as a salesperson to find out what the real issue is or the real decision maker is. Okay, so I have to think about it doesn't count. Remember, everything counts. Credibility is the #1 reason why people make a sale, or lack of credibility is the reason why people don't trust you, and that's why you have a hard time closing. This is why you need to focus yourself first on, okay, how do I present myself? How do I look? What kind of clothes am I wearing? How is my hair? How is my language? How do I come across? Do I do some small talk in the beginning? Do I ask enough personal questions so we have a good relationship? Do I focus on the product or the relationship? So you see, everything counts. And if you do your job well, closing is a logical consequence. It's a logical conclusion. And it's not the words you say and the technique, and you can use this and that to convince someone. But if someone is not emotionally ready to do it, then all your arguments are for nothing. Okay? So ask yourself first, how do you come across, and what is it that you can do to have more credibility and more professionalism so that closing will be easy. One of the closing techniques is called the logical conclusion. And it goes like this. If there is no more questions, then the next step is to fill out the application. And you simply go straight in, getting the contract and start filling it out. And say, oh, what's your name? What's your date of birth? And you start already without actually saying, do you want to do it? Yes or no. So by asking, do you want to do it? Yes or no, he could potentially say, no, I don't want to do it. So, and you want to avoid that question. So that's why you just say, okay, and the next step is, boom. If there's no further questions, then let's fill out the application. And then you just go with it. You also can give him a selection of 2 choices. You say, do you want the red model or the blue model? Okay. You don't say, do you want it? Yes or no? No, that's bad. You want to say, you focus on 2 options, okay? And if he has 2 choices, he has to think about the choices and not whether or not he wants to do it in the first place. And sometimes that alone will do the trick. Remember, a confused mind always says no. So you need to have a lot of clarity when it comes to your presentation. So what you want to do is basically, you want to get every single point or every factor of your product or presentation clear. Don't make it complicated where you could have this, or you could have that, or you could have this, or you can have this included, or that extra. No. What you need to do is you need to decide together with the client which features, which factors, and which price, which model, everything in detail, so there is no question to the right or to the left what else he wants to do with it. You want to make sure if he went for it, what would be the actual final version of the product. And that's where he needs to decide. So if there's no more questions, okay, if everything is clear and that's where you want to be, then closing is easy. But if he has a million questions and uncertainties and there's lots of variations and possible options, then closing is impossible. So remember that. You can also use an invitational close, which is something like this, where you just put on a nice smile and say, Mr. Client, why don't you give it a try? Why don't you just try it out? Let's try it out. Okay, and if you do that with a nice, happy smile, you know what? 80% of the cases, it works. Okay, one of the main techniques that I always use that worked really well is to ask the client what his goals and dreams are. So before I start anything, I said, Mr. Client, okay, I did a lot of financial planning. So I said, Mr. Client, what are your goals and dreams? And he said, well, I would like to buy a house. Okay, all right, then house. Number 2, I would like to save taxes. Okay. What else? Well, I would like to save for my retirement. Okay, what else? Well, I would like to buy a boat. Okay, all right. So you talk about that. So he has a few factors. Now, you say, what if I could show you a product or a solution that could help you to achieve all of those goals and dreams? Would you take advantage if that were the case? Oh, yes. Okay, let me start to explain. And then you start with your presentation. And then at the end of your presentation, you summarize everything. You say, so you see, now let's get back to our goals and dreams. With this conclusion is, can we buy the house that we were, talking about in the beginning? Yes. Does this product help us to save taxes? Yes, it does. Does this product help to save with your retirement? Yes. And do we even have enough money left over to buy your dream boat? Yes. Okay, as you can see, Mr. Client, we were able to achieve all your goals and dreams with this one product. Great, isn't it? Okay, you see, if you make a list and you focus on the things that the client wants and you connect the things that he wants with your product, then you're going to be successful, for sure. Well, sometimes just changing around a word instead of saying, you have to sign the contract, okay? That scares some people. Sometimes all you have to say, well, and if everything is in order, all I need from you is to confirm right here that what you said is true. Okay? And then you give them the contract, basically. Or so that we can get started right away. So you don't say, sign the contract, it's legally binding, and if not, then you're going to be in hell. No. So you see, sometimes using strong language like that scares people. But just to have a nice way of putting it, okay? Or you could say something like, where would you like me to send you the paperwork? At home or to your office, okay? So how you say it, how you put it matters. Maybe you remember the TV show Columbo, the detective from the 80s. And I call it the Columbo close, okay? And it's actually a wonderful sales technique that I often use or used. And basically it goes like this. So usually what happens in a scene with Columbo is he was trying to solve a murder. And then he says, okay, thank you very much, goodbye. He turned around. And then as he turned around, he says, oh, one more thing, one last thing. I almost forgot. And then he asks like the question that actually he wanted to ask, okay? So you can do the same thing. You can say, well, Mr. Client, okay, you're on the phone, for example. You say, well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time and goodbye. Oh, wait. One more time. Sorry, just before I hang up. If you really like what I have to offer, would you be able to invest 50 to 100,000 into it? I mean, if you really like it. And then he says, well, if I really like it, yes, then I would do it. So you say it as if you almost have forgotten to mention it, but in reality, you actually place this question's intended, okay? And I tell you this, because you say it kind of in a naive, innocent way, most people are inclined to say, well, okay, well, of course, yeah, then I would do it. Okay, so you don't make it the main focus of your presentation, but this is how it works. One of the most successful closing technique is the relationship close. And the reason why is because you do your job right before. You focus on the relationship rather than the product. So sometimes when you have a trust established, when you have a great relationship with your client, where he's your friend, then he will not even question certain things. He will just believe what you have to say and he will go for it because he trusts you. And that's the kind of relationship you want, where you know closing is 100% sure. Okay. So for example, you can also say, look, if you were my brother, I would recommend this product to you. Okay. So remember, the golden rule is always the product, the client needs to trust you and he needs to like you. And then they will find a reason to buy from you, okay? Because they want to make you happy too. And that's why you focus on the relationship. Sometimes giving him something first, like a little present, or doing something for the client, he will feel the need to return the favor, so to speak, because it's a two-way street, the relationship. That's also a very good thing, where you do something for him first and says, listen, Mr. Client, last time you told me this and that, and I did the following things because I knew you're going to like that, blah, 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 blah. And based on that, just based on the relationship, based on the favor you did, he will return the favor and you can close the deal. Now, let's talk about objections, okay? Sometimes you have to deal with objections at the end of your conversation, and most people give up too easily, okay? So I want to encourage you not to give up. Now, how do you do this? Well, the client says something like, well, I have to think about it. And then you can say something, well, okay, I understand, but what exactly do you have to think about? Which one point isn't really clear to you? And then the client, will say, oh, everything is okay, everything is clear. I said, okay, that sounds good. Now, let's talk about those features. The features so what I do at this point is I go through each major topic of the presentation, and usually, let's say there's 5 things that you need to consider, and then you say, hey, is it the color of the product? No, the color is fine. Okay, check. Is it, those features? Are you happy with those features? No, that's okay. Check. Is it this? No, check. So now you've checked off, let's say mentally or in your conversation, all those factors that you talked about, and really there shouldn't be any more, let's say, obvious reasons, okay? So now you need to keep asking until you have the real reason. And sometimes it takes courage to ask for the real reason, because maybe there's something that he's hiding or something that he doesn't want to tell you, okay? So you can say, Mr. Client, okay, so we talked about all these things. Everything seems clear, everything is good. Now, can you please tell me, let's, put the hand on your heart, what's the real reason? Okay, what's bothering you still? Why can't you make the decision today? And then the client will say, okay, well, I read this negative article in the paper about your company, and it got me really scared and hesitant. And then you know what the real reason is, and you can say, okay, Mr. Client, let me talk about that with you. And then you can talk about it, make him feel better, and then this problem is out of the way, okay? So sometimes you need to find out what the real reason is, and only then you'll be successful. Otherwise, you'll always be in the dark, you'll never know what the real reason is, and you'll never close the deal. One of the main things that you should know as a salesperson is what kind of personality structure does your client have? And there are 4 main personality types, okay? Whatever names you use, but I use the colors because that's how I learned it. So there's the color red, the color blue, color green, and yellow. Okay, so those are the 4 main types of people or personalities. And the red person is someone who is dominant, who is, let's say, dynamic, who is loud, who is sure of himself, confident, and so forth. That's the red type. The blue type is the analytical type. He needs rational reasons, he needs data, he needs information to support his decision. And the green type is the friendly, happy, smiling, very, nice to deal with person who wants to have a great conversation, who focuses on the relationship and so forth. And the yellow type is the one who's a very special guy, who likes art, who drives a special car, who wants to be, who needs lots of raising and recognition, but wants to be special. Okay, so those are 4 different types. Now, if I deal with the red guy, so someone who has that structure, and I bore him with facts and figures and data, I can see in his face he will get bored. Sometimes what I can tell the red guy says, hey, listen, do you want to make money or not? He says, yes, of course I do. Okay, do this, sign here. Sometimes it takes 5 minutes and the deal is done, okay? Because you know how to talk to the right guy. If I say this to the blue guy, if I say, hey, do you want to make money or not? He says, wait, hold on a minute. I need to see first all the info, the blueprint, the fine print, all the details and so forth. So I can't talk to him like that. So the blue type, I have to talk differently to. I can say, look, here's all the info, based on statistics, based on the numbers, you will have an advantage, and here is, the book that will explain everything in detail. And he needs those things to make a decision, okay? And the green guy, if I go to him and say, hey, you want to make money or not? It's not going to work because I basically ran over him. So you need to have a great conversation. You need to become friends with him. You need to tell stories. You need to laugh a lot. He needs to like you, okay? He needs to like you when I say, oh, this is such a nice guy. And he will only do it because you are such a nice guy. It doesn't matter what the details of the deal are. He wants to do it because he thinks you're a nice guy, okay? And the yellow type, he needs a lot of praise and recognition, or you need to say something like, look, not everybody has this. This is a very unique, limited edition, so to speak. And imagine if everybody, drives a BMW and you drive this special edition XYZ, you're going to be very special. You're going to be different. And that's what he needs to hear, okay? So, so depending on the type of person that you're dealing with, there's a different way of approaching that person. There's a different way of closing with that deal, with that person. So in general, when it comes to closing, there are a lot of details and different techniques in the brochure. If you actually read the brochure, there's 22 actual ways of how you can close. So I didn't want to cover everything in this video, but focus on the relationship, focus on being professional, focus on trust, building trust, okay? If you do those things and you do your job well, then closing is easy. And also, if you focus not necessarily on your presentation, but you focus on how the client acts and feels and reacts to your things, that's when you will be successful, because you need to look at the client, observe the client, and see how his body language is, because more than often, most cases, the body language will tell you everything you need to know whether or not the client is ready to buy or not.